There are people who move through the world as if carrying a quiet winter inside them. They feel deeply, often more than they will ever admit. Yet they learn to place a gentle space between themselves and the warmth of others. Not out of cruelty, not out of apathy, but from a long-practiced habit of protecting what is tender. Emotional distance becomes a shelter, soft, invisible, familiar, a way to stay safe while still appearing present, a way to avoid the tremors that closeness often brings. And if you look closely, you can sense it. The way they listen more than they speak, the way they avoid eyes that linger too long, the way their silence feels like both a refuge and a locked door. This is the psychology behind that distance, not judgment, just understanding. There is a particular stillness in those who find comfort in emotional distance. Not the stillness of apathy, but the stillness of someone who has learned to survive by tucking their feelings into safer, quieter places. They are not cold. They are careful. They do not avoid connection. They simply approach it the way someone approaches a fragile object, with steady hands, slow breath, and a practiced awareness of how easily things can break. People often mistake their calm for indifference, but underneath that calm lives a mind that rarely stops observing. They notice everything: the shift in a person's tone, the tremor in someone's breath when they are anxious, the subtle pause between words when someone is hiding hurt. These are the details that make closeness feel like both a possibility and a risk. For them, emotional distance is not a barrier made of stone. It is a soft buffer, like the space between waves and the shore. It is a place where their thoughts can stretch out, unpressed by expectation. A place where they can breathe without performing, without being read too deeply, without having to offer explanations for the emotions that move through them like uninvited guests. There is comfort in that distance, a comfort born from predictability, from the quiet assurance that no one can reach in too quickly, too suddenly, too deeply. In this refuge, they can choose their own pace. They can choose how much of their internal weather they reveal. They can offer glimpses, a thoughtful gesture, a small smile, a moment of softness, without exposing the entire landscape. Their connections often happen in brief, controlled openings rather than wide open doors. Many people never notice these moments, but to them, they feel enormous. It is easy to imagine emotional distance as avoidance, but to understand it is to see its tenderness. It is the way someone tries to carry their own storms without letting the lightning spill out and startle anyone standing close. It is the way they try to protect others from the intensity of their inner world, or perhaps protect themselves from the uncertainty of another person's. There are days when their distance feels like peace, a quiet room where nothing demands to be solved. But there are also days when it becomes heavy, like the air before rain. Because stillness can be soothing, yet it can also be lonely. Many emotionally distant people live in that paradox. They want to be known, but only in ways that feel safe. They want closeness, but not the kind that threatens to dismantle the systems they've built to stay emotionally steady. They want connection, but not at the cost of losing the delicate balance they've established inside themselves. And so they create a version of closeness that feels manageable, conversations that stay just enough on the surface, relationships where affection is implied more than spoken, moments of vulnerability offered in controlled doses, like a hand briefly reaching through a doorway before retreating again. They do not always choose emotional distance consciously. Often, it is simply the only way their nervous system knows how to remain regulated. To them, Emotional closeness can feel like entering a room where the lights are too bright, where every detail is suddenly visible, where the softness of their inner world feels exposed to interpretation. Distance dims the brightness, it softens the edges, it creates a buffer between the heart and the unpredictable movements of other hearts. And yet, despite the space they keep, they are usually the ones who feel things deeply. They just feel them inwardly, quietly, without needing their emotions to spill into the room. Their inner world is vivid but private, full but contained. Emotional distance, for them, is not about pushing others away. It is about staying intact. A quiet refuge, a familiar shelter, a place where nothing inside them feels too loud, too fragile, or too easily misunderstood. Emotional distance rarely appears suddenly. It is not something a person wakes up and decides to wear like a new coat. It forms slowly, quietly, shaped by moments that leave small marks on the heart. Marks subtle enough to dismiss, yet deep enough to remember. For many, distance begins in childhood, long before they understand what closeness even means. Sometimes it forms in homes where emotions were unpredictable, where affection appeared and disappeared without pattern. Children raised in such spaces learn that depending on others can feel like stepping onto thin ice. Sometimes it holds, sometimes it cracks. So they learn to tread lightly. They learn to need less. They learn that relying on themselves feels safer than waiting for someone who may not show up. Other times, distance comes from growing up with caregivers who meant well, but didn't know how to meet emotional needs. The child crying in their room learns that quiet is easier than asking. The child who is told to be strong learns to hide softness. And the child who senses that their emotions overwhelm the adults around them begins to shrink their feelings down to manageable sizes, manageable for everyone else. Some learn distance through absence, a caregiver emotionally unreachable, though physically present, a parent who loved in action, but not in words, a household where feelings were private affairs, tucked away like fragile objects meant to stay out of sight. And then there are those whose distance grows from hurt, a betrayal, a humiliation, a trusted person who mishandled something vulnerably offered. The heart remembers the moment it learned that vulnerability can sting. And even years later, even after healing, the body still instinctively steps back when someone gets too close. Emotional distance can also be inherited, not in a biological sense, but through modeled behavior. When children watch adults who rarely express affection or struggle to speak openly, they absorb that rhythm of relating. They learn that closeness is something subtle, implied, or silent. Not because the adults didn't care, but because they never learned to navigate emotional terrain with ease themselves, and life continues to teach. Adolescence adds its own lessons. Friendships that fracture, first loves that end abruptly, betrayals that leave a lingering aftertaste. Adulthood adds more, relationships that demand more than someone can give, environments that punish vulnerability, workplaces where being too open becomes a liability. Eventually, emotional distance becomes a pattern, not chosen, but practiced. A quiet muscle memory, a reflex shaped by years of learning that safety lives in silence, in neutrality, in controlled emotional exposure. But distance doesn't grow only from pain. Sometimes it grows from sensitivity, deep sensitivity. The kind of sensitivity that makes emotional closeness feel overwhelming, like standing too near a bright flame. These individuals protect their nervous systems by creating space, not because they fear connection, but because they feel everything intensely. Distance becomes a way to regulate, to breathe, to stay grounded. In many ways, emotional distance is a testament to resilience, to the ways people adapt when the world teaches them caution, to the ways they learn to protect their inner world, even when they crave closeness. The origins are never simple, and they are rarely singular. A childhood pattern here, a painful memory there, a genetic sensitivity woven in between. Across time, these elements converge and shape a style of relating that looks like calm detachment, but is, in truth, a carefully built form of safety. And beneath that safety lives a quiet longing, sometimes acknowledged, sometimes buried. A longing formed before words were available for it. The longing to be understood without risking the fragile stability that distance provides. This is where emotional distance begins, not in coldness, not in indifference, but in the earliest lessons about how to survive closeness. Emotional distance may look like a personality trait, but beneath it are complex psychological mechanisms, patterns shaped by the nervous system, attachment style, and the brain's instinctive drive to protect what feels vulnerable. The nervous system is the first architect of emotional distance. When someone experiences emotional threat, criticism, conflict, or vulnerability, the body reacts as though danger is approaching. Their heart rate increases, their breath shortens, their mind becomes foggy or hyper-focused. To calm this internal alarm, the body chooses withdrawal, the most efficient way to reduce emotional intensity. Distance becomes not avoidance, but regulation. For those with avoidant attachment patterns, closeness triggers a subtle alarm. It's not that they dislike intimacy. It's that intimacy activates old memories, conscious or unconscious, of inconsistency, overwhelm, or disappointment. Their mind learned long ago, relying on others is risky. Needing someone exposes you. Pull back before you lose balance. These internalized beliefs form invisible walls, walls not made to isolate, but to stabilize. Cognitively, people who rely on emotional distance engage in protective thinking patterns. They downplay their needs. They convince themselves they are better off independent. They rationalize emotional withdrawal as practicality. But beneath that logic is a quieter truth. Admitting desire for closeness feels vulnerable, almost dangerous, because it implies needing something that could be lost. Psychologically, distance is reinforced by avoidance cycles. Someone gets close, discomfort rises, withdrawal occurs, temporary relief follows. The relief rewards the distance. The cycle continues, not out of coldness, but out of conditioning. For many, hypersensitivity plays a role. Their brain processes emotional cues intensely. Their empathy is sharp. Their perception is finely tuned. Closeness becomes overstimulating. Distance becomes soothing. Others experience what psychologists call deactivating strategies, mental and emotional maneuvers that reduce the perceived emotional pull of relationships. They may focus on flaws in others, emphasize independence, or redirect attention to work or hobbies whenever closeness begins to deepen. These strategies reduce vulnerability, but they also reduce the intimacy they quietly crave. Neurobiologically, emotional distance can even release dopamine, the chemical associated with control and stability. When everything feels regulated, predictable, and contained, the brain relaxes. Chaos diminishes. Emotional overwhelm recedes. Distance creates a kind of order that closeness sometimes disrupts. And yet, despite all these mechanisms, people who keep emotional distance still feel deeply. Their inner world is not empty. It is simply internal. Their feelings do not vanish. They turn inward, circling quietly, instead of being expressed outwardly. Their walls are not steel, they are glass, transparent enough to see through, but solid enough to prevent anyone from getting too close too fast. The psychology of walls is not about coldness, it is about protection, regulation, predictability, self-preservation. To understand emotional distance is to understand the brain's profound desire to protect the heart, and to see that behind every wall is someone who built it not out of disinterest, but out of necessity. Inside emotionally distant people lives a quiet conflict, a tug-of-war between the desire for closeness and the instinct to retreat. It is not dramatic, it is not loud, it is subtle, like a tide that moves in and out without ever announcing itself. They want connection. They feel the pull of intimacy. They recognize the warmth that another person can bring. But the moment that warmth moves too close, something inside tightens. A familiar alertness rises. A quiet whisper warns, "Careful." This conflict creates an inner landscape filled with contradictions. They may crave affection, but flinch when it arrives unexpectedly. They may feel lonely, yet turn down opportunities for deeper connection. They may long to be understood, but resist sharing the parts of themselves that would allow it. The distance they maintain is not because they don't feel. It is because they feel so much that closeness becomes overwhelming, too intense, too exposing, too unpredictable. People often misinterpret this push-pull dynamic. Partners may feel shut out, friends may see inconsistency, loved ones may interpret the retreat as rejection. But internally, the distant person is simply trying to balance two truths. I want you close, and I don't know how to stay open when you get close. This conflict can show up in subtle behaviors, delayed replies, emotional neutrality during intimate moments, sudden quietness when a conversation becomes personal. These responses are not dismissals, but protective reflexes. Inside, the distant person often feels guilt for retreating. They may replay moments where they withdrew too quickly. They may wish they could offer more openness, more warmth, more transparency. But emotional closeness requires a level of vulnerability that feels destabilizing, and the body chooses protection over connection every time. There is also a fear of being misunderstood, of opening up only to be judged, of revealing inner softness that others may not handle with care. For many emotionally distant people, vulnerability has historically been met with misinterpretation or emotional injury, making withdrawal feel safer than exposure. Loneliness becomes an unspoken companion, even in relationships, even in comfortable routines. They may feel the ache of unexpressed emotions gathering like quiet waves beneath their calm surface. But expressing those feelings feels like stepping into a room with too many windows, too much light, too much visibility. This internal conflict often leads to a pattern of emotional self-reliance. They convince themselves that they should carry everything alone, not because they enjoy isolation, but because sharing feels like an emotional risk they're not sure their heart can take. And yet, beneath all of this, something softer exists, a yearning for someone who understands the rhythm of their distance, someone who recognizes that their retreat is not rejection, but fear, someone who moves gently, neither pushing nor disappearing. The conflict within is not a flaw. It is a balancing act between longing and protection, between the need for closeness and the need for safety, between the desire to open the heart and the instinct to keep it shielded. This conflict does not make them unloving or unreachable. It makes them human, deeply human. living with a heart that remembers too much and hopes quietly for someone who sees its complexity. Every emotionally distant person, at some point, experiences a moment that softens the edges of their distance. It rarely arrives dramatically. It often begins as something small, an unexpected kindness, a moment of being deeply understood, or a presence that feels safe in a way the body did not anticipate. This shift is rarely planned. It happens naturally, quietly. Perhaps someone listens without trying to fix, or perhaps they speak with a gentleness that doesn't demand more than the distant person can give. Sometimes it's the simple experience of someone staying consistent, showing up in ways that feel steady, predictable, and genuine. The nervous system begins to relax in that steadiness. Walls loosen, not because someone forced them to, but because the body finally recognizes a space where vigilance is no longer required. The shift often begins with a feeling of unfamiliar comfort. Closeness no longer feels like stepping into bright light. It feels like walking into a room lit by soft candles. The distance that once felt necessary begins to feel optional, something that can be adjusted rather than clung to. Emotionally distant people notice these shifts internally, long before they express them externally. They may find themselves thinking more openly. Their body might soften during conversations. Their reactions become slower, more thoughtful, less protective. They begin to allow others to see glimpses of their inner world. Small disclosures, quiet admissions, softened tones. Sometimes the turning point is born from self-awareness, a realization that loneliness has become heavier than vulnerability, a recognition that distance has protected them, but also isolated them. A moment where they look at their own patterns and feel a gentle desire to understand them rather than defend them. And sometimes the shift is triggered by loss. Distance can cost people relationships, opportunities, or emotional moments that matter deeply. The awareness of that loss can spark a quiet longing to change, not drastically, not abruptly, but gradually. The shift does not remove the instinct for distance. The instinct remains, but it becomes quieter, less urgent. Like a guard who no longer needs to stand so close to the door. Emotionally distant people rarely open suddenly. Their heart opens in increments, in breaths, in pauses, in tiny movements that may go unnoticed by others but feel monumental to them. The shift is not the end of their distance. It is the beginning of choice. They no longer distance automatically. They begin to consider moments where closeness feels possible. And that possibility carries its own beauty. It is not dramatic. It is not cinematic. It is subtle, steady, and deeply human. The moment something shifts is the moment distance becomes less of a shield and more of an option. Something they can loosen when the world feels safe enough, when the right person stands close enough, when their own heart becomes curious enough to let in a little more light. Healing emotional distance is not a transformation. It is a quiet process of expansion, slow, deliberate, and deeply internal. People who have relied on distance for so long do not suddenly become open. They do not wake one morning ready to share everything inside them. Instead, they learn to let light in through narrow openings, like blinds pulled back just enough to let a single beam enter a dim room. This kind of healing is not about forcing closeness. It is about understanding the rhythm of one's own emotional comfort, recognizing what feels safe, noticing when the body relaxes rather than braces, observing moments when connection feels grounding instead of overwhelming. For many, healing begins with self-recognition. seeing their own patterns with compassion rather than judgment, understanding that distance was once a survival tool, a brilliant adaptation to environments that demanded caution. When they see their distance as protection rather than failure, shame begins to loosen its grip. From this place of gentle awareness, small openings can form. They may start expressing simple emotions aloud, feelings once buried are now spoken quietly in sentences that feel both new and vulnerable. They may allow someone to sit with them during difficult moments rather than withdrawing alone. They may practice staying present when their instinct tells them to retreat. Integration happens in micro moments. Moments when they stay a little longer in conversations. Moments when they choose transparency instead of silence. Moments when they let someone see a sadness, a worry, a hope. These moments accumulate slowly, like soft drops of rain that eventually form a small pool. Connection begins to feel less like a threat and more like a possibility. It is important to recognize that healing does not eliminate the instinct for distance. It simply softens the urgency of it. The reflex to withdraw still arises, but it no longer controls every response. The person now has the capacity to pause, breathe, and decide whether retreat is truly needed. Some find healing through relationships, romantic or platonic, where emotional safety is consistent and unforced. Others heal through introspection, through journaling, through therapy, through moments of surprising self-insight. For some, healing occurs quietly over years, almost unnoticed, until one day they realize their distance has thinned like fog. Letting light in does not mean becoming emotionally transparent. It means allowing connection without feeling endangered by it. It means understanding oneself deeply enough to know when distance is healthy and when it is habitual. It is not a journey toward bold openness. It is a journey toward balanced presence. And in this balance, the emotionally distant person discovers something profound. Closeness does not have to dissolve their autonomy. Connection does not require surrendering their inner sanctuary. They can remain themselves, quiet, careful, reflective, while still being emotionally available. Healing, then, is not the removal of distance. It is the gentle integration of closeness into a life that once relied solely on space, a delicate weaving of safety and vulnerability, a choice to let light enter without flooding the room. In the end, emotional distance does not disappear. It simply becomes softer, less rigid, less absolute, less defining. What once felt like a wall becomes a gateway. What once felt like isolation becomes choice. People who lived behind emotional distance often discover that their quietness, once misunderstood, holds its own kind of beauty. Their slowness to open is not a flaw, but a rhythm. Their introspection is not avoidance, but awareness. Their caution is not rejection, but a testament to how deeply they feel. A softening of the edges doesn't create a new person. It reveals the person who was always there, the one beneath the reflexes, beneath the practiced composure, beneath the rehearsed neutrality. As distance softens, they begin to move through the world with a different kind of calm. A calm born not from avoidance, but from understanding. They recognize their emotional landscape with clarity. They honor the boundaries that protect them without letting those boundaries keep them alone. They learn that they can let people in without losing themselves, that they can feel deeply without becoming overwhelmed. That vulnerability can be measured, chosen, and shared in ways that feel authentic. The softening also brings humility, an awareness that others, too, carry their own forms of distance, some obvious, some invisible. This awareness creates compassion, a recognition that every person walks through life with a complicated relationship to closeness. And so they stop judging themselves for their distance, and they stop judging others for their openness. Everything becomes more fluid, more human, more forgiving. In this softened state, even silence changes shape. It no longer feels like protection. It becomes space, room for connection, room for reflection, room for shared presence. Life begins to feel less like something to manage and more like something to experience. But perhaps the most profound change is this. They begin to trust themselves, trust their capacity to stay grounded even when someone stands close, trust their ability to navigate intimacy, even imperfectly, trust that their heart, once shielded by distance, can open without breaking. This trust is not a burst of confidence. It is a gentle unfolding, a slow awakening to the truth that emotional distance was never a flaw, never a weakness, never something to fix. It was a story, a chapter, a way of surviving, perhaps before they even understood what they were surviving. And now, with softened edges, they step into a new chapter, not of dramatic transformation, but of quiet evolution. A chapter where distance and closeness coexist peacefully, where safety and connection no longer compete, where the heart feels steady enough to be seen, even briefly, even partially, even imperfectly. The documentary ends here, not with a conclusion, but with a continuation, a recognition that every emotionally distant person carries a world inside them, warm, complex, sensitive, and deeply human. A world that does not need fixing, only understanding. And as the edges soften, that world becomes just a little more visible, a little more shared, a little more open to the light.